So after you've logged into AEM, and this is actually the training server, and I'll take you through why, just the absolute value of this training server. So when you log into AEM, you're presented with this page of multitudinous choices. For the most part, especially for you, the one you're going to be concerned about is going to be the digital assets link right here. You also have the website's console. So you can get to that. If you happen to have been in some pages previously, this little option to the side is pretty handy. So if I was in there editing on this Lacerte homepage from PTG, I can just click on that and it would take me directly to that. I've worked on a couple of different installs of AEM, and at different installs, they've had some of these other tools engaged, but maybe not so much at right now at Intuit. The other component that you may have, or console you might have an interest in, is this inbox, and I didn't need to go there actually. This is where you're going to manage, where you can manage workflows. So the three that you might be interested in are the website manager for editing web pages, digital assets for managing assets, and the inbox for managing workflows. There are really just one application over here that you might have an interest in well, and this is the workflows module. And what that will allow you to do is to terminate or suspend a workflow that you've initiated. And again, I won't take the time today to go through and do that, but there are quite a few videos out there, and also help information on the CMS Online Help Guide. So I'm going to just take a moment to click into the WCM. Again, this is where all the pages are managed. And what I'm going to call out here is that this is actually a replica of production all the way down to this last node. So if you wanted to go through and work on pages that are in production but have a safe way to do it, you can do that here. The thing that you can't do is edit any of these up here above this training users node, but you can edit when you've logged into the training server. The system automatically generates for you two different folders. One will be production copies, and the other one would be training. So if I wanted to go through and make some changes, or work with a page, which is a really good thing to do for new authors, just to get their heads kind of wrapped around how does this work, and they don't want to make a mistake in the production environment, and I could just go through and highlight a page, copy it, go to my production copies node in the training server, and paste that in. Then I can edit on this all day, no harm, no foul. So the training server isn't just, a lot of times in a company, a training server will be a neglected sandbox where it has content from, the Clinton administration in there, and it's all outdated and it's sluggish and it doesn't work. This is a replica of production that's updated every week. And it actually had Adobe 6.1 before any other environment did. So that's, I'm not showing you the WCM, I'm just showing you how the pages are structured, that you have everything that would be in production, and you have these training nodes down here. And if you have logged into the training server, you could switch over there and see that you have a folder in there as well. Just want to go back here real quick. So when you are faced with this page on your login, you're going to click Digital Assets, and that's going to take you to, shockingly enough, the DAM. So we do call it the DAM. So get used to that, enjoy it, embrace it. Let's see. Okay. So again, the same thing is true over here. We have an exact replica of everything that's in Intuit.com on the production side, stored in assets, and we have a training users folder. So if I was to scroll down here and take the time it would take, I could see that just about everybody who's logged in has got a folder down here. So this happens to be mine. So when you log into the DAM, it doesn't create all these folders underneath. You have to create those yourself. So so another way just to so I just want to give you a quick overview of a little bit of navigating through AEM, and then also just a little bit about the details of working within the DAM from a UI functionality perspective. So you can click here and get back to that start menu if you like, and then click and go to the WCM. We also have these icons across the top, pretty straightforward. You can see what this is would take me to the WCM. The camera icon takes us to the DAM where we are. we've got campaigns, we have the inbox. So all of these, that's a pretty good way to navigate through, AEM without having to go back to that main menu. This, you have two different views here. On this left-hand side, we have this page nav. And I want to call out something. So you can see as I'm going through here and I'm clicking on this left-hand page nav and I'm trying to get to a particular folder and an asset that I want to get to, nothing is going to refresh on this right-hand side until I click into a folder. So once I click into a folder, the contents of that folder comes up, and the same thing here. Then I have to click into that subfolder, and now I can see everything that's in there. So these two, they operate and they update a little bit independent of one another. So it's just something to be aware of. This is a mistake a lot of people make starting out. They'll go through and say, okay, I want to copy an asset into one of my folders. I've gone over here and I'm here, and now I'm going to click paste, but you really haven't moved because you haven't clicked on a folder. So it kind of works that way. All right, so let's go ahead and look across the top here and see what all these things are. So on the left-hand side, the page nav, we've got this refresh. You also have the refresh on this side as well. And sometimes that's important if you're running a workflow or there's a status change. These are not dynamic, so it's always best to kind of do a refresh if you were going to run a workflow or something like that. I am logged in as an admin, so I can do all these things, but you may not be able to see all of these things here, all these options here. But we'll go through and just talk about each one of those one at a time. So under new, we have the new file, which is an import function. And then we also have new folder. So let me get to a place where I can actually create a new folder and not change somebody's world. So I'm going to go back to mine. So if I was to click on new folder, then pretty straightforward, I could just add in the folder that I needed right here, and that would populate underneath. We have copying and pasting. I think WebOffice probably do this quite a bit because some of the best practices for the DAM are that if you find an asset that you like and you want to put it in your page, you have to copy it into your team's node so that you have control over that asset. So early on in the early rollout of AEM, there were web authors who would go through and say they were working in QuickBooks and saw an icon that they liked in the ProTax group or some other group site and link to that. And then somebody would delete that because they had no idea that someone was using it in a different site, and that would create havoc. So anyway, so copy is used a lot, just to kind of move assets around. Delete and move, those are pretty straightforward. And then we have activate and deactivate and workflows. So the activate, deactivate, if you want to activate or deactivate an asset, you've got to run that through a workflow. And what you have to do, that was already subject to workflow, is highlight the asset, and then you click on workflow. And we'll get a little bit more into workflows here in just a minute. So all these, so you've got all these commands across the top. Again, you've got all this is called out in the CMS Online Help Guide. I think a lot of these are pretty straightforward. You also have the option here to go through and sort on these columns. You can go through and configure this UI however you want. If you want to add additional information, or if you're finding that, I'm not really needing size or width or anything like that, then you can customize those. And of course, you can pick them up and drag them. So it's a fully customizable UI. You can stretch out. It's a little tricky to do different parts of the UI. So it's pretty straightforward. But it might be one of the first things you want to do is go in here and get this set up the way you like it. Also, AEM or Adobe did us no favors in putting this arrow here, but if for whatever reason you're in this UI and I just need more real estate, there's a little tiny collapsible arrow right here. And if you click on that, it will shut down that left-hand nav and open it back up. And the same thing is true on the WCM. So anyway, that's kind of that UI right there. And if you were to double-click on any of these assets, this is going to open up the area where you can do a couple of different things here. So you can go through and you could download from here. You can see that option right there. You can get a little bit more information about the asset. And then here is where you can actually add properties. So you could add a title to this asset and a description. And these are searchable. So we're going to get to that in a little bit, and we'll do a little bit more deeper dive on this. But this is really where you make your assets findable, is by adding a title and a description. We're also asking that you add a language. And if you've got, some of these, like a creator and a contributor, that's really good for, again, if you're a contractor and you've developed an image, and just so somebody can identify who created this image, you're just kind of playing friendly within the system to identify who created it and who contributed to it. So previously I was at Intel up in Hillsboro, Oregon, and they would tag assets with tags. I don't believe that is really used too much here, but you could go through and add tags to these. That would make those searchable and findable. I don't know that there's a huge use case for that here at Intuit, because I don't think there's a lot of dynamic populating of pages through assets that have been tagged. But there is a tagging system there as well. If you were to go through and make some changes to this, I'm going to add a title and a description. You'd have to go down here and find that little tiny save button, because if you don't save it, that will not stick. So if I went through and made these changes and added a title and a description, and again, the purpose of that is to make them findable. We'll do a little bit of work here in a little bit, and you can see how that works. You'd have to save it. You can also do reset down here. So those are those two panes. Here is on this left-hand pane, it's giving you a little bit higher res or bigger view of the asset. It's got your name, the size, modified date, dimensions, and the option to download. This is one of the options. On this, and then in the center here is kind of what we're calling the asset properties, and we recommend title and description, contributor, creator, and language be added. And again, I think every team does it a little bit differently, but we're just calling out the functionality that this really does add to the findability of the asset in the WCM. Then over here on the right-hand side, we have a number of tools up here as well. So we have renditions. Again, I don't think that these are used at Intuit as much, and that might be changing, but this is just AEM is going to create different versions of that asset, and you could actually, AEM could be set up to run some different rendition versions. So if you had an asset that was scaled in one particular way, you could run a different scaling rendition on it. But again, I don't think that's used here at Intuit. Versioning, and you can see that this asset does have versions on it. So this would be important to do if, like here, this was an asset that was only going to be used on a weekend or on a particular, for a particular asset or a particular application. You could go through and create versions of that asset, show you how to do that in a little bit. And references is, where is this asset used? So again, if you were going to go through and say, I'm going to delete this FE lock PNG, you'd want to go through and check your references to see, oh no, it's actually on a web page. So before I delete it, if I'm not the owner of that web page, I need to notify the owner of that web page or not delete it. So that's kind of the far right. This is actually a brand new tab I've never seen before, referenced assets. So I'll get some information on that and get back to you guys on what that is. So again, we access this UI. We're going to close out of it by when we're in the DAM and we've navigated to a folder and we've got our list of assets here. We just double click and that's going to open that up, and that's how you get to this. Okay. So that's kind of a turbo view of going through the DAM. Again, we've got additional videos for this that will take you through and show you what all these things will do. Here's another way to access references. So if you didn't want to go through and double click and open that up, you could just click on the asset, and through the tools drop down, get references. You could also download the asset from here. Any questions at this point, or? Okay. So what I'd like to do next is just kind of go through the highlights of, again, I can send out this documentation, or you can access it from the CMS Online Help Guide. If it's easier for me to aggregate some of the key things and send them out to you, I'd be more than happy to do that for you. So this is what we're calling the Managing Digital Assets pre-work. So the training used to be all live classes like this, and now we're trying to automate it and make it more self-directed within ILN. And so what was the pre-work will now be work that you'll have to do on your own. And I apologize for going so fast here, and kind of hopefully your eyes are doing okay with this. So let's go through and talk about asset types. So within the DAM, really for the most part, the number one use case is the image. That's really what is used most. For videos, for the most part, those are hosted on YouTube. There may be some teams that bring assets into video assets into CMS. Audio are limited use cases, and rich media right now are kind of the same. So I do know, like on the legal side, they have PDFs that they access, and there's a specific path for getting PDFs up into the DAM, and that is through the PD team. So if you have any interest in that or need to get PDFs into the DAM, you'll have to get a contact from the PD team. So again, I know that there can be a workflow that you can run out of PDF if you want to create a HTML wrapper on it, but I don't think that's been initiated here. So really for the, the big thing is it's images. So that's kind of our number one use case. And really, this is kind of really basic instruction here, but they should not be too big or too small, and they really should be optimized more than anything else. And we've got a lot of really good information on how you're going to go through, tools that are available to optimize assets. And we've got, again, it's an advanced collaboration session of somebody going through and really talking through Ricky Romero with XD, talking through how do you optimize assets and what are some of the tools. So it's really a great session, probably a really good use of half an hour of your time. So with the DAM, really, if you could do these four things, then for the most part, you've got everything you need to be able to do for, for working in the DAM. It's pretty straightforward, and it's really pretty simple. So the first thing that we call out is, having a naming convention, which we think is really important. We mention this, but then also say, we've got a recommendation for the naming convention. But really, it's not that you have to follow it to the letter of the law. It's just that we're recommending that whatever your team is, that you have an approach, right? So that's the big takeaway here. So here, our naming convention is this combination of a category, three-letter acronym, or TLA, image description, and the image format. So here we've got Hero. If you looked at this here, it'd be Hero, ProGreen, and PNG. But for your group, you can, you might be using something different. But the big thing is to find something and stick to it. So that's really our big, kind of recommendation on the prepare side. On the upload side, it's pretty straightforward. How do you upload assets into the DAM? We've talked about adding properties, and I showed you the title and the name, or the description. And those are things that you're going to want to do to add to your assets to make them findable for your authors, and then running a workflow. And those are pretty straightforward. It takes a little bit of time to get your head wrapped around, but the fact that you don't have to run both web page workflows and asset workflows is kind of a plus. And one thing to understand about the assets is they have to be activated before they can be used in a web page. So if you were to go through and upload a bunch of assets, and your web author goes through and he creates this amazing page and links all these assets in there, and they're not activated, you're not going to be able to activate that page because it's going to require all those assets to be activated. So let's go into, so that's I think pretty straightforward. Prepping is really the naming convention. It would also include optimizing, uploading, how do you get them into the DAM, and then creating logical DAM folder structures, adding properties, so again, making them findable, and then running a workflow, making them available for a web author. Do those 4 things, and you should be in pretty good shape. So let's go through and talk about preparing an asset. So again, I've mentioned these 2 videos that we have out there, and the links to them are within this guide. And one is called Asset Optimization. The other one is Maximizing Page Performance. You could look at either one of those. This Maximizing Page Performance has a little bit more information from a web author's perspective on how to make your pages more user-friendly in terms of load time and everything else. So, but still valuable information on both those. So there are some, some caveats on size of the image and, with a trade-off with quality, and both those videos really cover that pretty well. So really the process for preparing them is to optimize them, make sure they're in the proper format. So it's JPEG or PNG. And here are, some uses for both of those. And I think everyone, if you're dealing with assets, are pretty familiar with these, what some of these best uses are, So for a JPEG, it'd be like still images and photographs, and PNG, traditionally, those have an alpha channel, and those are used a lot for icons. And then, of course, the asset naming convention. So, again, it's just like your desktop and your own file structures. If you call everything test_1 through 600, eventually it's going to be really hard to find those. So deciding as a team what your naming convention is going to be really important. Okay. So I can do this a couple of different ways. Actually, let's just hold off on this. So let's talk about downloading assets, right? So if I've got an asset that's in the DAM and I want to download it, how am I going to do that? So again, there are links to not only job aids, but then also videos that will show you how to download an asset. You can do it a couple of different ways. I'm back in the DAM, and I've highlighted, let's just say, this asset right here. So I can go to Tools and Download. And that is going to zip a file and save it to my desktop. So I can go through and determine, hey, where do I want to save this? I'll just stick it in here for now, or maybe I won't. Let's see, there we go. And I could download that asset that way. The other way is if I was to open this up, and if you recall in this window, we have this download right here. And that's going to pull up a copy of the asset, and then I'm going to right-click and save image as. And that will actually save it in its native format. So you can see I've done that before, so it's going to append a number to the end. So depending on kind of your preference or how many you're going to download or what that might look like, you could do it either way. So the benefit here is that, I could select a lot of these to download, right? So from within this list view, I'm going to highlight several assets, and then from the tools drop down, click download, and then that's going to give me this package of all those assets that I can download. So one of the reasons you might do that is if there is an asset here and you need to rename it, you've got to rename it unless this is changed in 6.1 outside of AEM. So you'd have to download it, rename it, and then upload it. So there's 2 different ways that you can download an asset. I would, so let me just do a quick check-in. So I slated this to go to 11:30, and we can do this a couple of different ways. Like, we can go through now, and if you wanted to download assets, so I show you one and then you do one, we can do it that way. Or I can talk you through kind of all these pieces. And then, if there's time permitting within that 11:30, you can work on the practicum, which has all these exercises for you to do: download, rename, upload, tag, run workflows. So maybe Kyle, maybe you can speak on behalf of the group. Would it be, what's better for you? Is it, my thought is time more than anything else, is that if I show you all these things, then you'll have them, and then you can do them on your own, or if time is permitting, at the end of the session.
Yeah, let's, if you wouldn't mind showing us, because we, this training is recorded, and so we can go back to it and reference it later, and then Susan and I can also work with all of our other editors as well to do like a quick demo for them.
Okay, awesome. All right. All right, so we've covered preparing the preparing side of this. So again, you're going to download assets. At that point, when they're on your desktop, you can go through and rename them, and according to whatever naming convention that your team has put into place. If an asset happens to be too large, that would be a really good time to go through and optimize it as well. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is uploading an asset. So you could search for duplicate assets, if duplicate asset names. AEM will also give you a little bit of help with that as well. So when you're going to upload an asset, again, if you're a brand new property, you're going to want to add a file structure that makes sense. So again, we have this asset folder structure. It's just a recommendation for how you might group your assets, right? So before you just start, all right, team, go upload assets, you're going to want to make sure that you've gone through and decided, hey, what is this going to look like? So you can see that here are some recommendations. But for instance, they have common here, and then underneath those, they'll put logos and icons and heroes. But if you actually ended up with, say, 1,000 logos or icons, that wouldn't make sense just to have 1,000 icons sitting within a common folder. So maybe it'd be common icons, and then you might want to break it out farther. So anyway, so our recommendation is definitely get your asset folder structure in place. So again, the way you create a folder is I'm going to navigate to the place where I'd like to put a folder in. New folder. Okay. Unfortunately, that was all recorded, so apparently I can't spell KM training without, hitting the cap locks 3 times. Anyway, so it'd be new folder, and then it's going to give you that little folder naming dialog, and you can put that in there. So now I've got my folder in there. So within that, then you'd want to put in subfolders, and again, on the CMS Online Help Guide, we have some recommendations for that, but just as a team, you'll have to go through and decide what that should look like. So get your folders all named and all perfect. Then we want to go through and just do some uploads to this. So it's there are just a couple of ways that you can do this. There is the traditional. Okay, I'm in the KM folder. Let's go over there. Again, if I had just stayed here and clicked on this, that wouldn't do it. But if I clicked on the right-hand side, if you go down here on the page tree nav, click on that, then that exposes the folder. So then I can go through in the new file, and then that's going to allow me to go through and browse and pick whatever assets I want to bring into this. And there they are. And you could do some renaming here as well if you'd like. So you can go through and then just click upload. And there they are. Sometimes you'll see that AEM actually does some background work on all assets that are uploaded. So there could be that initially one of these doesn't show to be available. If you just give it probably 5 seconds, it'll become available. If you're still not seeing that, then we recommend just go ahead and click that refresh, and it should just pop right up. So that's one way to do it. File, a new file, and then that gives you access to browse, and then you can pick folders or assets from wherever you'd like. Another way to do it is you can do drag and drop. So let me get to my desktop. So once you get this situated like this, I could just grab, any of these assets and just drag them over. So, and here, so again, it's just your basic drag and drop. So when you do that, there's a couple of things to be aware of. So here we're seeing that AEM is going to prompt and say, there's already an asset with that name here. What would you like to do? This is where some of this is a little bit clumsy in the way it's named, but let's go through and talk about each one of these. So again, actually, before we do that, this is, again, so drag and drop, you just grab a bunch of these and go ahead and bring them over. I think that's pretty straightforward and probably doesn't need any further explanation. Okay, so here is a couple of things you can do. So it's saying, okay, AEM saying you've already got this in here, what would you like to do? So you can create a version, and if you do that, you can just kind of click create version, and that's going to create a version of that asset. You could replace, and basically what that's going to do is basically swap out that asset. So if, for instance, this asset had, it's got yellow, lime, kind of a aqua, and it needed to be, it's orange, lime, and aqua, and it needed to be yellow, lime, and aqua, and that's all you need to do is make that change. So perhaps you would have opened this up in Photoshop or Illustrator, whatever it might be, made that change, and then just drag that in. If you click replace, that's just going to swap that asset out. So, and that might be a way to go. And then the third one, which is, again, a little more clumsy in the way that it's labeled, is to click cancel if you want to adjust the name. And that did not work. Let me try this a different way. Okay, so the way that functionality used to work, it would, and it looks like it's changed in 6.1, is that if you brought this over here and click cancel, it prompts you to change the name. But really what it is truly just canceling it at this point. So it's saying, you don't want to replace this and you don't want to create a version, you want to do something else. So then you would, you could use file, new file, and where it's creating that conflict and you click open, it would allow you to change the name here. So in drag and drop, it's just a faster way to get bulk images into the DAM. But if you do have duplicates, it will call out those three options. One is cancel. That means you're going to cancel the operation. Replace, it's just going to be a swap out of the existing image or create a version of that image. And I don't really know how much that versioning is used at Intuit for versioning assets, but that option is available.
After you replace an image, do you have to activate it again?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so let's see. We've gone through uploading. Again, real quick, a couple of different ways to do that. File, new file, or drag and drop. So pretty straightforward. And that will take us through, that second step of, and also making sure that your asset folders are named correctly. For the most part, a lot of teams don't have to worry about that or deal with that too much, just because it'll be new authors coming into QuickBooks. So you're not going to be responsible for, naming folders. But if you have a little sub project, you just need to be aware that those should be, just like anything else, intentionally named. So, and there are some exercises you can go through for, uploading and your assets. That'll be in the practicum. So we talked a little bit about asset properties, and let's go into a little bit deeper dive into this. We'll go back into the DAM, and I'll go ahead and maximize this. So again, if we open this up, here is where you would add in those properties. So the reason you would do that is for this, let's do this. Okay, so I'm opening up a page in the WCM. So this is where an author is going to go through and make all his edits, her edits. We'll just give it a second to load. Okay, looks like it's loaded. So so I'm in this container and I've clicked the background image and I want to swap out this hero image that's here. There's a couple of different ways. So I would do that. I would access the DAM through this content finder, which is over here on the left-hand side. Content finder is a whole word search. I'll have to double check and see if there are any kind of specific 6.1 updates to the content finder. But basically what this is doing is it's searching on these properties here, the title, the description, or elements of the name. So if you were to go through and do a search on, let's say, an icon, I can see that icon is there, but I'm sure that if I went through here, I'd see multiple versions. There it is again. So if I'm not aware of which one of those is mine, then again, you might end up, not that you'd stick an icon in a hero image, but you might end up pulling in an asset that was not part of your site. So, so what we're recommending is that, so another example would be, okay, I'm going to search on a hero, and I've got all these hero images that are here as well, but I don't know which one's in my site. So just because one of the recommendations on the asset properties is that you actually put your team name in there. And I've called ours learning because if I put training, I'm just afraid somebody else would grab that as well and say, oh, we're just doing a training on a QuickBooks site. But anyway, so now I know I've got a hero and I've tagged it with learning, and then that's the image that I could bring in here and swap out for the one that's here as well. So the way we make our assets findable is to go through and add a title and a description to those. We have some, excuse me, we have some recommendations for how those should be put together. And then again, the creator, the contributor, and the owner. So let's take a look at what some of those recommendations are. So if you go through, again, we're on the CMS Online Help Guide, and we're searching for asset properties, and we have some of the basic recommendations. Now, I know that there are some groups, again, I think when it comes to asset naming and folder structure naming and how you tag or put properties into your assets, that really is for your team to decide more than anything else. But these are just some recommendations that we have that have helped. So here under title, oops, there we go. So really the title could be an expansion of the image name. So that has turned out to be pretty findable for some people. So if it was a mobile hero for GoPayments, that's pretty easy for them to find. So you can see it would be broken out from HR QuickBooks Pro and broken out into that. For the description, we recommend that you put your team name in there so that, again, if you start to see the icon used in multitudinous pages across multitudinous sites, if it says KM icon cash register, then we know that that's your site and that's your asset. So you're actually loading your asset into your web page. And again, that's transacted through the properties. And then some of the other ones we've talked about already. Creator, first and last name, and then contributor would be the same. I'm not sure why that information isn't in there. And then language, and this is more important for global, and perhaps when things get localized. So again, the way you access these properties, you're in the DAM, you've navigated to your folder. I've got the KM training folder. I'm over here. I'm going to grab that asset, double click and open it. And this is where I would add those properties. So the title could be, and this asset is actually incorrectly named because it's part of the practicum. But if you were to add these, so actually I wanted to talk about one more thing in the description. Sorry, I kind of got off that. Also in the description, along with adding your team name, you'd want to add in kind of the width and the height designation as well. So that could be important because I've seen many images that are in different sizes. So if you're a web author and you've got a grid responsive and you have this column, you have these 3 columns across your page, you want to make sure all your icons are the same size. So if I was looking for an icon that was 220 pixels high, I could do ICN KM H220 and find that asset. That would pull that asset up. So that'd be pretty straightforward. And while it may seem kind of complicated, I think it's just it's almost like a village dialect or something that your team starts to learn. Like, how do we find our assets? And again, it's all those are, the way you do that is by adding a title and a description, and then there's some guidance on the CMS Online Help Guide for what some of those should be. Again, we recommend also that each team kind of comes up with their own idea. Well, that was interesting. So it was, AEM was prompting the change. Oh, well, we don't need to talk about that right now. Okay, so we've gone through, we were talking about asset properties. Again, primary reason you would do this is it makes them findable for your web authors. And you've got an exercise for adding your asset properties in there. And the next thing we want to talk about are workflows. So I'm actually going to take a second. So I've got 10:57. Do I have you? Does anybody have a hard stop at 11, or can I go on a little bit more on this?
Yeah, I would say go on.
Okay, so we'll go through and talk about workflows. This is what we call our 7 truths. They require approval. They're used anytime content is published live, pulled off the live server, archived, or deleted. They're a bit tricky to grasp and to manage because it takes a little bit of time to understand them. They're less tricky if you're just doing asset workflows. Eventually, almost everyone gets them. The best way to learn them is to go through and use them, get your hands on them, and then, of course, there's additional information for this on the CMS Online Help Guide. So let's go ahead and, so basically there are 2 roles in a workflow. There's the requester, and that'll be yourselves, and then there's an approver. That's pretty straightforward. So if it gets approved, it's going to go live. If it gets rejected, it'll get sent back. So that's, nothing mysterious there. There are 2 different types of workflows. We have web page workflows, which you should not have to deal with, and then asset workflows. So that's for, and you'll notice that delete page image, that's the same workflow on a web page and an asset, but it is truly just the same thing. So if you wanted to delete an image, you have to send that through a workflow. If you want to activate or deactivate an image, it needs to go through a workflow. So let me just take you through the steps and the roles. So step number 1 is to initiate the workflow. That's pretty straightforward. You're going to request that the workflow be initiated. That's done by the requester. And then the next step is going to be initiator comments. So, and that's also done by the requester or yourselves. So the situation where you'd want to add comments would be, okay, I want to activate an asset, but I don't want to activate it right now. I'm going to activate it in 2 weeks at 12 o'clock. So you would add those comments into the initiator comments step. And then after that, it would go to an approver. So this is somebody in marketing to take a look and say, yes, this should be activated or deactivated or deleted or whatever it may be. So those are the 3 public steps. There are actually quite a few steps that go on behind the scenes that you may not, that are kind of checking payloads and some other things that AEM does. But these are the 3 primary steps that a workflow goes through. Okay, so I'm going to say disregard the piece on the top. Actually, let's not even go there. So and you might hear this, and I don't know how closely tied to web work your group's going to be, but when you initiate a workflow in the WCM, you do it through the Sidekick. But here, basically, you just do it here, right off this file list, right off the top here. So again, I'm in the DAM. I've navigated to the KM training server, and I'm going to activate this asset. I'm going to click Workflow, and it's going to bring up this Start Workflow dialog. So the top dialog is actually where you can go through and pick which workflow you want. Now, I am in training, so there may be just a number of workflows that we're seeing here. I'm in the training environment that you will not see in production. But remember, really all you can do is delete, activate, and deactivate. So we're going to look for activation. And again, it's request for activation. These are all alphabetized. So we're going to click that. Comment and title are 2 different fields that you can add in here. And the reason you would use these comment, it's pretty straightforward. Why are you going to activate it? And then the title is that you can use. It's actually can be sorted when you get into the inbox if you wanted to go through and add some additional, if you wanted to be able to group some of these together. So comment will just say, asset ready for launch. The workflow title might be, let's just call it a campaign. Clearly my typing has gotten much better. And then we'll do a start. So you'll notice when you kick off that workflow, under status, you've got this little icon here because it's doing something. So, and you can see on the step, so if you hover over that icon, under the status category, the step shows it's checking the payload. And that's, again, one of those back-end processes that AEM's taking us through. And it's showing us the request is for a request for activation. So, so we go into the inbox, and again, this is where you're going to manage. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm logged in as an admin, and I just think there's way too many things in here. Let me just log out real quick, and I'll log back in as an author. It'll be a little clearer visually for you to take a look at. So here, if I went back to that asset, it's showing me request for activation and the initiator comment. I'm going to grab this next one and send it through a workflow. So we open up the Start Workflow dialog. I'm going to go down to request for activation. You already see this is a leaner list because and we'll start the workflow. So check the status, so request for activation. Now we're going to log into, so we've done the first step, which is the request. Now we're going to go into the inbox. Again, this is just the folder icon up on the top. This is going to show me all the workflows that I have here. And I'm going to click on this one. That's the one I just sent through. And you can see where the comments show up. The comment that I put in here, this is underneath the title. So that's giving me some information. And then the workflow title here, and it's a sortable column. So if I wanted to kick off a workflow for 12 different assets, and I had 50 in there, I could sort on that title column, and that would give me just the ones that I wanted to do, because you can actually do these in bulk. So if I wanted to go through and grab this and do a bunch of these, I could do them at the same time. So anyway, so the first step is initiated the workflow. The next step is initiator comments. So I've selected the asset, I've selected the workflow, I'm going to click complete, and it's going to give me this dialog box. So what I need to know is if I don't do anything here, publish at, it will activate this asset, it will immediately go into the queue, and typically queue assets get activated pretty quickly, so I mean just within minutes. But if I wanted to set the time, I would do this, hey, let's do this 2 weeks from today, around midnight, and here's why I'm doing it. And then you can go through and say, okay. Now you can see that went out of my inbox because it's gone through the second step and it's gone on to the approval step. And so it's basically gone. And it's going to go to, if I logged in as an admin now, it would go to, I'd see that in my admin account. So again, DAM or asset workflows are kicked off from here. You can use the tools. You can use the workflow piece. You could also grab several of these. Oops. And kick off a workflow as well from from the site admin. Seemed like there might have been a little, yeah, there we go, a little bit of a hiccup, but it looks like it went through. So again, the benefit of doing these here, if you're in, you can grab several of these in this view and kick off an activate or deactivate workflow. But if you just had one, you could also do it from just the workflow tab. So again, it gives you the option to do these in bulk. And then if I clicked over to the inbox and I see, oh, okay, I've got all these here. Again, I can do these in bulk as well. So here are all my workflows that I just kicked off. And I would click complete. And it's just it shows you up here, there's 1 of 7. So you would go through and just add in, if you wanted to set a different date or time or whatever it might be, and then you can go through and just do those in bulk. Now a couple of things so here is one thing I wanted to call out as well, and that is you get a notification of any workflow that is sent. So if these notifications, if you're doing a lot of work, can really start to pile up. So we recommend in your Outlook box, we recommend putting together just a kind of a rule for certain workflow messages from AEM, but we don't recommend that you just blindly delete them, because if there's an issue with the workflow, it'll show up in that message. So, and that is the best place, typically just for assets. That's not as big of a deal. For web pages, it tends to be a little bit bigger of an issue because there are multitudinous reasons why a workflow on a page wouldn't have gone through. Less so for assets. But anyway, you'll get a notification. So here it's telling me that this has gone through the request for activation. It's in the marketing approval step. It's been assigned to me. And I have requested activation for this image. I could click on it and take a look at it, and it gives you all that information. So the system notifies you that these assets are in a workflow. So one thing I did want to call out on one of the tools, so we're going to go back to that main page. And over here, when we mentioned workflows, and we click on this is going to open up. It's called AEM WCM here, which it is not. So we just call this the workflow manager, essentially. And it has these tools across, tabs across the top. And this can help you a little bit if, again, this I think is more prevalent for a web author. But if you wanted to go through and cancel or terminate some of these workflows, for whatever reason, maybe you accidentally clicked on 400 images and sent them into a workflow, or you didn't want to activate it or whatever it is, it's in that tool that you can go through, click on the instances, highlight the one or several assets that you wanted to either terminate or suspend. And so terminating will just stop it's as if the workflow had never been initiated. It will just stop it. Suspending it just halts it. And again, there could be several reasons why you might want to do that with an asset, but just wanted to call out that this is where that happens. So if I went through and said I just terminated that asset, put in a comment, and you can see it just dropped right out of that box here. And I can go through and take a look at, here's an archive of anything that has happened here. And if I had any failures, those would be noted there as well. So I just wanted to call that out. That can be a handy tool to use. Primarily, that's best, again, or most used by web authors, and not so much for the DAM, but there may be a use case where you need to know that and do that. So we've gone slinging through this at a pretty rapid rate. I feel like we've covered just about everything. And because anything else, we've talked about viewing asset references, asset versions, and moving or renaming an asset. And really, as I said before, currently, I believe the only way to rename an asset is to download it, rename it on your desktop, and bring it back in.
What about videos? Can you host videos here and stream them similar to how it's done on YouTube?
Yes, I do believe that there are groups doing that. And what I would do and what I would want to do is go through and verify if there's a particular process for that, like if a workflow has to be run on a video, and see if there are any groups doing it. Right now, the way we train it is that we've got the video component, and that video component is within a responsive page, is completely set up to go out to YouTube and pull in those YouTube videos. So let me take that as an action item just to double check on that and see if there are groups doing that and how they're doing that. So like I said, for the most part, it's pretty Spartan use of the DAM just to use images, like even PDFs or anything else. We're only finding out now that like the legal team does that, but not a lot of other teams are doing that. So Kyle, let me grab that and I'll get some information for you on that.
Okay, yeah, thanks, appreciate it.
Yeah. So I understand that this is a pretty quick run through on all these things. And again, and I would just say that, you can see none of this is rocket science. None of this is difficult. There are a couple of areas where it's a little bit particular, a couple of things where, we're all busy and we all have, 10 hours and 12 hours in our day and 12 hours of work. So taking some of those shortcuts with naming conventions and putting things in folders that aren't named appropriately or not tagging or adding asset properties are some of the things that we see people run into, and then they try to find their stuff, and it just creates a downstream kind of lack of efficiency. But for the most part, it's really those 4 steps. Those are the things I think that would be most important for you. Now, for web authors, we go through and show them all the different places, that videos and icon fonts and everything else. But I think right now yours is going to be pretty much dam specific. So if you don't have any questions, what I would like to do is, send out, we're calling it this practicum, and have everybody just start working through this. And I think the good thing about this is, again, it's easy, I think, with AEM to see somebody else do it and say, oh, yeah, that's easy. And then somebody says, okay, I need you to go through and download these assets, rename them, upload them, tag them, add properties to them, start running some workflows. If you really haven't done it and you haven't gotten your hands on it, it's just like anything else. It's like watching somebody drive a car. I can do that until you get in traffic and you're doing 74 and, people are merging and texting at the same time. So anyway, we, definitely recommend going through and just running this practicum. It's the best way to get your hands on the tool and then to start learning these. And the instructions are pretty straightforward. Download the assets, name them according to whatever your group's naming convention might be, and then upload them into a folder. Again, you've got a folder created within the training server, and we want you to go through and create a folder, create a bunch of folders actually, add the properties, and then run a request for workflow. And I think if you do that, that'll really be helpful to get you guys in a place where you've gotten this under, not only in your heads, but in your hands. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, I think it sounds great.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions at this point? I think somebody might have been trying to get in and that was kind of garbled. Okay, well, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to send this out to everybody on the call, and I will be online for just a few minutes in case you run into a problem or some sort of situation. I know that Zach is interested in everybody at least going through and trying to work this practicum. Again, there's nothing difficult about AEM. It's just a little particular in some areas, so we'd really appreciate it if you can go through and take 15 minutes and work through this. Let me send that out to you. I will be on mute, but if you have a question or something like that, just go ahead and raise a hand or call out to me, and I'll go off mute and answer your question. Then I will have to drop off at about 11:30. So, all right. So if there aren't any further questions, appreciate your time, and I'll send the practicum out to everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. This is absolutely great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Kyle.